I handed him my passport. You could kind of sense the attitude shifted with the agent, and the passport agent looked to his right and asked if there was a tactical terrorism response team. They sit me down, 2 agents, plain clothes. They say, hey, we know you're an attorney, and we know you're taking on some high-profile cases. High profile is a case that has media attention. And the only case that I'm involved in right now that has media attention is representing students at University of Michigan. One of my clients was charged with a felony for protesting the war on Gaza. That's the criminalization of free speech, and that's wrong.
We're kind of used to when you come to the airport, you don't get to play. You sit down in that room and you have to answer questions. How would you best explain for someone that's traveling what they can and can't do at the airport?
So look, as a U.S. citizen, if you're a non-citizen or a permanent resident, you're at the discretion of the agent. At the border, law enforcement and Customs and Border Protection have broader rights. They're allowed to take your phone at the border without a warrant, without probable cause. Now, I don't have to give them my password. It is nerve-wracking. The border is strange like that, intentionally. That's designed to instill fear.
How serious do you think this situation is?
As an Arab and Muslim traveling, every time you cross the border, the anxiety, stress, and fear that you feel is always elevated because you feel like you're
One of the most stressful parts of travel for anyone that's coming through the American border is always, are they going to stop us? Are they going to ask us questions? Are they going to ask for our phone? And, it's weird because 99.9% of the times you've done nothing wrong and you're just coming back home or you're coming for a visit, but that stress and anxiety is always there. And they have a lot of authority at the airport, especially in customs and immigration on the border. They have a lot of authority and a lot of power. So that kind of plays to our disadvantage, right? Amir is a defense attorney. He got stopped at the border and he was selected to go to the side, and it wasn't a random check. They knew exactly who they were stopping. They knew exactly what they wanted from him. And the interaction between Amir and the border control is very interesting. It's a story that you don't hear too often. Amir is used to confronting government. So this story is kind of different. We dive into that as well as a bunch of other stuff. This conversation is great. If you're looking to know what to do on the border, what to expect, if you're a visa holder, if you're a green card holder, or if you're a U.S. citizen, there's information about that throughout this episode. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you for taking the time out of your day and giving this podcast a listen. The only way this podcast will ever grow is if you support it through following, subscribing, liking this video, commenting, sharing it with your friends. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let's get the show started.
Welcome aboard Middle East Airlines.
والمتوجهة إلى طيران الشرق الأوسط يرحب مدينة القدس العربية.
Amir, the way I start this off usually is, although we're talking about a specific subject today, but I still would like you to introduce yourself in the way that you see yourself.
Sure.
So when Amir looks in the mirror, who's that guy?
Okay. So every morning, when I look at myself in the mirror, I know that I'm Amir Makled. I know that I'm a father, first and foremost, a husband, and an attorney. Those are how I would define myself.
In that order?
In that order,
Mm-hmm.
And then I also think about my personal health and experience, right? When I'm looking in the mirror in the morning, I'm always thinking about benefiting my self-being, which is important to me as well. So a lot of times, and lately, it's not, I'm not feeling so great. I want to do better in terms of being in the gym more and being mindful of my diet. And then you start thinking about work and doing better at work and doing more, and what else can you do to fine-tooth, comb through all of your information, and you got to be able to self-critique. It's important, I think, and you have to be really, anybody that can really see themselves from a third party's perspective has an ability to have awareness, and I think I've always tried to be more self-aware of what I'm doing and how I'm doing it.
I feel there's two types of people. There's a type of person that is able to look at themselves from a third person point of view and be like, I have mistakes 1, 2, 3. A person that can't, and then a third person that says, I see them and I'm going to work on them. Would you categorize yourself in that third category and that second one?
I think I'm in that. I see them and I'm going to work on them. And, as I go through my life, I try to work on them. And those are the struggles, actually working on them.
Where do you feel like you find the most struggle? Because I like to categorize them in, like you said, physical health, mental health, and then spirituality. I like to add that layer.
Yeah.
Which parts of them do you personally feel like the hardest to work on?
So the categories you gave me: spiritual, physical, and mental health. So mental health is really contingent on a lot of factors. The stress levels that somebody has is really based off of the outside factors that you're dealing with. And that creates anxiety, that creates fear, and some thoughts of, or feelings of depression. And those silent stressors are difficult, but I like to remind myself that things that are outside of my control, I shouldn't worry about. Mm-hmm. Because if I can control the issue, if I can do a task, if I'm not putting off or procrastinating something, then I won't be stressed out about it.
Right.
The ones that I'm leaving to the back burner all the time, I know I got to get to that. I know I haven't done it yet. I'm either afraid to do it or don't want to do it or sick of doing something. I don't know what it could be, but those are the ones that cause stress. Physical health, it's easy to control diet. Ramadan just passed, and to me, Ramadan is my favorite time of year. Physically, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. I'm able to really get closer back to, what I want. Maintaining a right diet and being mindful of what I consume is important. I've gotten a little off in terms of the last few years, but I've made it a point this year to do better in my diet and exercise. And, spiritually is always a struggle, but it's not a struggle where I'm afraid of it or avoidance it. It's am I always connecting enough to my Lord? I'm a firm believer in God. I'm a Muslim, and I see myself as a Muslim. Do I believe, in the different denominations as Shia and Sunni? Yes, I believe that I'm a Shia Muslim, and that's important to me. But not so much in the sense that I look at other Muslims as different than I am. And so, I had debate in my family about some of the things that Shia believes as being exaggerated sometimes. And I might be speaking taboo about it, but that's how I feel. That's how I feel. Mm-hmm. But it's still a firm belief that I'm proud, and I'm happy. I'm really happy that I was born a Shia Muslim, because I've looked into a lot of different things, and I have found it to resonate the most with me, and so I'm happy about that.
You probably see a lot too, and we have this tendency that when we get presented different things, we kind of tie them back always to what we believe in.
Yeah, absolutely. It's our religion is very humbling. The Muslim faith is very humbling, and it's a faith where you and your Lord are often communicating one-on-one in our salah, in our prayer. And if you're doing prayer, with pure intention and doing it in a way where it's focused, it's supposed to have that, release of everything else outside. Mm-hmm. And when I can pray in that state, oh, it's beautiful. I feel amazing, and I almost come to tears sometimes, mm-hmm. if I can get in that mental state.
Yeah, you just talked about the mental struggles that come along with your practice, and no doubt it gets difficult. But you've been in the headlines recently, a lot, because of what happened to you when crossing the border.
Right.
I know you probably told the story a million times, but for the audience that still haven't heard, what happened to you while crossing the border? What happened?
So recently I was traveling with my family on spring break with my wife and 2 daughters. I came back from a 5-day vacation, and when I got to the passport control desk, I handed them my passport and my family's passport. They scanned through my kids, and the passport agent looked to another agent to his right and asked if there was a TTRT agent available. And I didn't know what that meant. And at that point, I could see that there was other, you could kind of sense the attitude shifted with the agent and the demeanor shifted a bit. So I looked up what that acronym was.
Right then and there?
Right there. I had my phone sitting with me, and I Googled it. I put TTRT CBP. CBP means Customs and Border Protection, who are the customs people when that's the agency. Came out, Tactical Terrorism Response Team. I said, okay, I'm being racially profiled. That's...
You didn't think it was a random check?
I was being racially profiled. That's how I felt. I felt this is random. At that point, I felt it was random. And I was being targeted and racially profiled based off of how I looked. I have a beard. I look hot.
Yeah.
I do. Now, I don't know why they stopped me at that point, but that's how I felt, right? And as a Arab and Muslim traveling, every time you cross the border, the anxiety, stress, and fear that you feel is always elevated because you feel like you're about to be targeted, and we always feel like we're looked at as suspicious. And so that's somebody that I think that's something that everybody feels.
Was it your first time?
I've never been stopped, and I travel often. I travel often outside of the United States. Every year, at least once or twice. Every year, I go outside of the United States for business and for pleasure. Mostly vacations with family. A lot going to Lebanon every year. I try to go to Lebanon every year, every other year. But I've never been stopped.
At that point, do you think that you're ever going to be stopped? Because you might be thinking, I'm an attorney, criminal defense, whatever. I'm crossing through the border, no questions asked. They probably know everything they need to know about me, and I don't do anything wrong.
So I did feel that way for a while because I always anticipated that they would eventually stop me.
Okay.
Because of the clients that I have and the associations I keep in my work. But at some point, I started to feel, well, I do so much work in court and with the government that, we almost become colleagues because we sit across the table from each other often. And so I said, well, I'm not too concerned. I'm at a different status now that I don't think that they would mess with me or bother me. And the initial reaction or gut instinct that I had that I was being racially profiled was changed when they took me into a secondary screening room.
Okay.
So when you go into this, there's an office that they led my family and I into.
Oh, even your family went?
Yeah, my family and I were led into an office initially. And it's a kind of a larger office with a long desk. If you can kind of picture like a Secretary of State office where there's several computers and a high desk and there's a row of chairs, 2 rows where people are just sitting. And there's an agent that's standing behind the desk, and somebody led me into that room and asked us to sit down. So we all sat down. And after a few minutes, another agent came, not in uniform, but in plain clothes, came over to my family and I, and, said, Mr. Makled? I said, yes. And he said, we'd like to speak to you. I said, okay. Is my family free to leave? I mean, why do they have to stay? They said, yeah, your family can go. We need to speak to you. We don't need to, deal with the wife and kids. So I looked at my wife. I said, just take the girls home, get our bags, and let me see what these guys want. I didn't have a problem with that. I felt actually a lot more comfortable knowing that the kids were on their way. And this is a Sunday night, it's 7:00. It's a school night. They've got school the next day. Spring break's over at this point for them. So I didn't want them waiting.
Yeah.
For me, I got all night. So once the kids left, I said, all right, let's see what these guys got. I'm in. Let's go talk. So they take me to another room. This one's a little different type room. This one's no windows, small table, only 2 or 3 chairs in the room, and a computer.
All right, every week I tell you about Whoop, but this week I'm going to show you how Whoop actually works. This is just a rundown of what Whoop showed me today. So you can see my strain, hours of sleep, sleep performance, and my recovery. And then there's a bunch of different things here that you can see as well. But what's important to note here is that my recovery was bad because I had a heavy workout the day before. Whoop was telling me today you need to rest your body. I woke up feeling sore. Like, you'll understand when you wake up you feel sore. You look at the app. It's really accurate in depicting how well you feel versus what the data actually says. It showed me that I should be within that range, that dotted line range next to the blue. I exceeded that a little bit because I still went and worked out. It shows you your sleep performance. I didn't sleep the best last night. 66%, 6 hours, 37 minutes of sleep. But what I want to tell you here and what I want to show you is it shows you everything that you need to know and about what happened and what you have to do moving forward. And because you're a listener of this podcast, you can try this out for free. You go to join.whoop.com/notfromhere and Whoop will send you their product. They'll send you Whoop 4.0 for a month for free to try it out. And you can get access to all these analytics. You can understand your body more. And I'm pretty sure after that 1 month, you're going to keep going and you won't stop. Again, that's join.whoop.com/notfromhere. And now back to the episode. Would you describe that first situation with the family as anxious, but then after they leave, you kind of wear the lawyer suit back?
Oh, yeah.
You said it's game time.
Yeah, my lawyer hat came on as soon as the kids left.
Okay.
Because at that point I'm like, my daughters, they don't need to see that first and foremost. It's not, it's wrong to, for them to see that at their age. And second, they don't understand, not even my wife would fully understand, why I was being selected. I didn't fully understand. I've never been the target of this. Usually when I sit across the table from a government agent, I'm doing it in the form of representing somebody, never as the target, of a question or interrogation. So they take me to this room and now I'm detained. Now I can't leave because this room is closed first and foremost. The main room where everybody was is closed. That door locks, and if you walk out of that room, which when my wife and kids walked out of that room, an alarm goes off if they don't let you, if they don't allow you to leave. So my wife got out of there pretty quick. The alarm went off when she walked out. So that's why I say I was detained. Because you're not free to leave unless they give you authority. When I get into this little room, they sit me down, 2 agents, plain clothes, 1 female, 1 male. They say, hey, we know you're an attorney, and we know you're taking on some high-profile cases.
Oh, they tell you that?
Yeah.
So you didn't have to tell them that you're an attorney?
No, they led. I didn't say anything.
Okay.
When I'm dealing with law enforcement, less is more. I don't give them any more details than they're asking, and I'm very intentional and selective in my responses. It's everything I'm analyzing, and everything to me in my response is going to be just enough for them to move on to the next topic without expanding or opening another door or line of questioning. So they brought that information to me.
But at that point, you know that this wasn't random.
Exactly.
Okay.
I said, okay, you've done your homework. So yeah, we know a lot about you. You're famous. I said, I'm not famous. What makes you believe I'm famous? No, I looked you up. Yeah, you do a lot of good work. You've been in the press a lot. You're a high-profile attorney. I said, man, I just do my job. So, whether I'm famous or not, I'm not signing autographs in the airport.
Yeah.
So, what's it to you? What's going on? He says, do you have your phone? I said, yes, I have my phone. Can we see it? I said, it's right here. So I showed him my phone, excuse me.
You're good.
I showed him my phone. He's like, do you mind if you unlock your phone and we want to look at it? I said, yes, I do mind. And he said, okay. He goes, how much of your work is on your phone? I said, everything. I said, a substantial amount of my work is in my phone. And he's like, well, we'd like to go through it. And he handed me a pamphlet. And this pamphlet is a summation of the federal statutes at the border, which I was familiar with. At the border, law enforcement and Customs and Border Protection have broader rights to confiscate phones. they're allowed to take your phone at the border without a warrant, without probable cause, for any rhyme or reason, if they believe if they want it. Really, they can take it. They're allowed to take it at the border only. Now, I don't have to give them my password.
So they can just take the phone without the password.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, I don't have to give my password, and then they would have my device without my password, and then they'd have to figure out how to, crack my password if they could. I don't know. But that's designed intentionally for the most extreme scenario. Government is supposed to do that only on a higher level of national security when they're taking your phone away. That's really what the policy of Customs and Border Protection is.
Yeah.
But in my situation, I knew that I wasn't on that high level. At least I was confident I hadn't committed any crimes. I was confident that I shouldn't be on that high level because I'm not a national security threat in my eyes.
Right.
Well, I'm just coming back from Punta Cana.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I still have my hat on. When you go to the beach, I had
Right.
my beach hat on. The agent at that point says, look, we can take your phone, because I took my time reading this pamphlet. Okay, intentionally as well. Because I'm trying to control the pace and the tone of the conversation. So he's asking me questions, engaging me. I'm ignoring it and looking at the pamphlet. You could look at that later. No, I'm gonna keep looking at it now. I'm gonna keep reading this, and I intentionally. It's almost painstaking how long I took to read this pamphlet.
Were you comfortable doing that, or was
yeah,
it a part of?
No. This is me. I'm trying to flip the script and the dynamic of the conversation. But at that point, he says, "Listen, we could take your phone." I said, "I know you can. What do you want?" He starts asking me questions. Do you think that this information? I tell him this information is privileged. You already know that I'm an attorney. You already know. He says, "Yeah, we know." And then he also made comments to me about my travel history. He says, "We know that you'd been to Lebanon in 2023. We know that you have filled out those forms where if you're taking currency more than $10,000, because a couple times when I go to Lebanon, I take a little bit more than 10 grand because I'm staying for about a month.
Yeah.
And it's quite expensive, with a family to go to Lebanon. So, they had those details already, which again showed to me this is not random. This is something they knew about. At that point, I told him everything in my phone is privileged. Everything. How could everything be privileged? He says. All your photos are privileged. All your apps. They're all privileged. All the text messages that you have with folks, they're all clients. And he said anybody could be my client. I said the majority of the people I come in communication with will end up hiring me for something.
Which is very true.
Yeah, it's true. That's. I'm a community-based attorney. I'm not somebody that is highly specialized in one area of the law, or working on only corporate transactional work, or doing something that. I have a community-based law firm, and I have a what I call door law. Anything that walks through the door, we're going to talk about. So and then if it's more specialized than me, I'll direct it and bring in other counsel or refer it to other attorney groups. So that's kind of how we are. I think of myself as the internal medicine doctor of the law. We come in. Everybody's coming in. The common flu, come on in. But at that point, I said, yeah, everything could be privileged. And he says, I got to talk to a supervisor about this. So he leaves the room and ices me for about 20 minutes and comes back with a legal pad at that point and says, write down everything in your phone that you think is privileged. I said, what kind of an exercise is that? How am I going to tell you the thousands of emails that are in my phone, the thousands of text messages, the hundreds of files that I have from my cloud at the office? It's impossible. No.
So they don't tell you what they want to see from your phone. They just want access to all of it.
Wanted access. And I asked him, why don't you just tell me what it is you're looking for, and I'll let you know if I'll give you an answer. He says, it doesn't work that way. I said, okay. And he comes back a third time after I pushed back again on giving him access. Okay, we're going to take your phone, is what he tells me. He leads with that. Now, again, I didn't want to leave that night without my device. I use my phone a lot, and I use it for work and everything. It's my phone. Everybody needs a phone. And I wasn't interested in having to fight the government later on to get it back, because who knows? They're not supposed to have it for more than a few days, I believe, but I've heard stories in the past, in my experience, where it's been months and sometimes years before they return a device. So I didn't want to get into that category, so I wanted to give them something I felt to get off my back. Would you allow us to see your contact list? I said, sure. That I don't think is privileged. You can look at my list of contacts only, and that's it.
Not take information, just look at it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So that's what happens. And this is a manual scroll, okay, not a dump, right? And this is important, because if it's a full data dump, who knows what they're looking at?
Absolutely.
And who knows what they're taking? And I can't be for certain if it was a manual search or a full data dump, because they left the room for a short while. But I don't know. With my device. So, but the consent that I gave them is a manual look, okay? And I wrote it down as to what I was allowing them to see. And they came back. And at that point, then the questions of me were more narrowly tailored. They started asking about individuals. Specific names. And when they came back with these specific names, I said to them, look, now I'm, again, telling you that I'm not going to answer these questions. Anybody that's a contact in my phone is a client, a family member, or a friend. And if they are clients, you're getting zero information out of it. And I'm not even going to tell them if they're clients or not. They're one of those three categories: family member, friend, or client. And that's it. At that point, I think the meeting relaxed. They didn't have much more questions of me after that. And you gave me my device back, and we walked out of the room. It was nearly 2 hours. So about 9 o'clock was when I'm leaving. And the immigration customs desk is cleared out. No one's standing in those long lines at the passport desks anymore. The carousel for your luggage is completely empty. The gate to leave the terminal is down, and they had to get somebody to lift the gate up for me to get out of there. So I was the last man, walking out. Like, turn the lights off behind you. That's how long they had me. And I asked the agent as I was walking out, I said, listen, do you anticipate that I'm going to be stopped like this again moving forward? And he says, I don't know. It's possible. I have a job to do. I'm going to write a report about this, and I have a box to check off. I said, okay, man, this is unfortunate, and I'm not trying to get stopped anymore. He said, well, I'm sorry, I can't control that. And that was it, and I walked out.
So there's a lot that happened there. But first, when you're walking out and he tells you it's a possibility, one thing you could do is you go, if someone asks you how was your trip, tell them, man, it was annoying. I got stopped at the airport. What you decided to do was you wanted to make this public.
So I didn't necessarily want to make this public. What I did do is called and, I spoke to my law partner, who's a mentor of mine and my business partner. Mm-hmm. And he's been an attorney for, nearly 50 years. And his experience is, well more seasoned than me. And I look at him as always the voice of reason. And I have other mentors as well that I reached out to. Senior attorneys that are, nearly 80 years old. And the opinion of all of the people that I spoke to Monday morning was this is not right. And they were thoroughly pissed off. And one of the, not my partner, but one of the attorneys that, I do look up to said, I'm calling the news. And I said, well, do you think it's worth it to do that? I said, yeah, we gotta tell the news about this. We need to make this public. I said, okay. So I thought about that for a while. And then I have a group chat that I started probably 7 years ago or more when Trump was starting the Muslim ban. I created a group chat of about 70 attorneys in the community, and I named this group chat Warriors for Justice. And it's got lawyers and judges from the local Dearborn, Michigan, Detroit area, of all backgrounds that are civil rights oriented or supporters of civil rights type lawyers. And I shared with the group, what happened to me. And again, the same resonation with all the attorneys. This is not right. This is not right. Make it public. Make it public. So I didn't call the news. One of those attorneys, and I think the first attorney that I spoke to, the senior mentor that I reached out and had, the Free Press reach out to me. That story, the Free Press called, and I gave them the same story that I gave you, went viral. And I did not anticipate that this would be something that would blow up so much. And I wasn't walking out of there with the intent to blow this up at all. But I wanted to share my story because I'm a firm believer in civil rights. And I'm a firm believer that I shouldn't be felt as if I'm being intimidated for the work that I'm doing. The agent brought up my work and brought up the high-profile cases that I've been representing on.
What does high-profile cases mean? I've seen it a lot, but I don't...
High-profile is a case that has media attention. Okay? And the only case that I'm involved in right now that has media attention is representing students at U of M, University of Michigan. One of my clients was charged with a felony for protesting the war on Gaza. Civil protest, peaceful protest, an encampment, and there's no signs of violence, vandalism, disturbing the school, just a protest against the war on Gaza in a demand from the university to divest from the state of Israel. Those were the demands of these protesters. We want the board to divest. Divestment is not a new issue, and it's something that's been often protested and discussed on campuses across the country. This group of students was charged criminally for resisting law enforcement when they came in with riot gear and batons and mace and started assaulting these protesters. And when they defended themselves from these assaults, they're the ones who were arrested.
Oh, they were charged.
All right? So they got charged with resisting and opposing police officers. So I made a lot of noise about that case. And we made a lot of media attention about that case. Now, that's the type of case I do call the news on.
Okay.
Those are the types of cases where I'm the one that's, hey, we need to get the story out. We need to call. We need to publicize it. That's the criminalization of free speech. And that's wrong. And so when this agent was asking me about these high-profile cases, that to me is my media case. The only one that I was dealing with was the student protesters.
Why do you think this high-profile case was different than all the other ones?
So
because you've had high-profile cases.
I've had high-profile cases in my career. Why is this different? Because of I have correlated what the current administration is doing nationally, and they're not mincing words about this. They're telling you. Marco Rubio has said, Donald Trump has said, that if you are engaging in anti-Semitic views on campus, you're out of here. And they're now deporting people for political speech, students who have student visas. Thankfully for our clients, they're all citizens. And they are now coming after cases like Mahmoud Khalil, a protester who is here on a student visa, or I believe he's on he's a permanent resident actually, Mahmoud Khalil's situation. And only political speech, not charged with any crimes, not convicted of anything, not starting a riot, we're going to set up deportation hearings. And that's what they've done. There's been other executive orders on law firms in Washington, D.C., major law firms with 1,000+ attorneys, that the Trump administration has gone and attacked and created executive orders saying that he disallowed them from entering federal buildings. And some federal buildings are federal courts. How are you going to stop a law firm from entering federal court? So there has been a systemic attack on lawyers as well. There is also a memorandum that's been published by this administration where they're investigating immigration attorneys. And I'm not somebody who practices in immigration law, but if you are an immigration lawyer that has a high volume practice and you're in what their eyes is filing frivolous asylum claims, and a lot of them, they want to sanction those lawyers and they want to try to have them disbarred even. So there's pressure on attorneys, and there is a clear movement to intimidate attorneys from taking on these causes. And so when they brought up high-profile cases to me, I'm connecting all these dots because this is what's happening recently and now. This is the environment we're in currently today. I'm not thinking about the other cases. I've had cops that I've represented and things of that nature. There's those are not why I believe I was stopped. So the attack on civil rights in this country is, I think, done intentionally by this administration to see how far they can push the law. Trump does a great job on testing and pushing back. He's somebody who's quite litigious in his professional life, and will use this same type of attitude of testing the waters in this administration. Now, sometimes it's actually good that he does that in certain aspects. Some of the policies, I'm not totally opposed to Donald Trump. I'm actually a fan of Donald Trump, to be quite honest, in certain aspects. But on aspects like this for civil rights, I don't agree with them. And when you're coming after law firms and attorneys for standing up for civil rights, I'm totally against that, because it's important that we have the ability to push back. Because once they start taking these rights away, we've lost everything.
Yeah, like where do you draw the line at that point, right?
Of course.
If it's because in essence, the case was high profile because it was an encampment, it was a protest, a Palestinian protest, and when you say that you're not allowed to talk about this, and even the lawyer that's representing you is going to get harassed for this, then you're not just striking fear or attempting to strike fear in attorneys' eyes, but everyone that thinks that I'm not doing anything wrong, I can just hire an attorney.
Right.
Right?
And the lawyers will think twice from taking on these causes.
You said pro bono for...
I did. I do the protester cases pro bono. Any student that's charged for protesting for Palestine, I will do it for free. It's important to me that we have the right to protest. And that topic specifically is important to raise awareness to the genocide that's occurring in Gaza. It's very important to me.
Even if this means that you're about to start getting harassed every time you travel?
Well, I take it as a badge of honor. I'm okay with that. And the good thing is, we have a community here that I'm grateful for our community. I'm humbled by the support I've received from our community, and in the outpouring support, not just from the Arab and Muslim community, especially from the bar. The members of the bar that have reached out to me is dozens and dozens of lawyers have been emailing me this week in support of my stance and in solidarity with my position. And so that I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful for the community that we have, because they understand and feel for the experience that I have and don't want me to back down. Keep fighting, keep pushing, keep doing what you believe in, keep representing our issues. If I was an attorney in Oklahoma, I wouldn't have that support because the community is so small.
Right.
And I might be scared to take on a controversial case because my livelihood would be at stake. In our community, I'm lucky because we get the opposite. And so that's a blessing. And I don't take it for granted. It's a blessing. And so if you're the loudest in the room in this scenario, it's okay, because the community will back you up.
Right.
And we can't be always scared to say, let's fly under the radar. because that's the instinctive response that we get from the elders.
Of
You know,
course.
like my parents would say, or my dad, be careful. You know, don't make too much noise. Be careful. And I understand that position. I get why somebody would say that, you know, because why do you want to bring the attention and the heat? Why do you want to put yourself in a position where, you know, you could be targeted? But in the role that I have, in the hat that I wear, and in the position that I'm in, I have a platform. I'm going to use it, and I want to press it because it's not right what's happening. There are stifling speech, and we're here to change the narrative.
Amir, I think a good chunk of the reason that what happened to you went viral is we're kind of used to when you come to the airport, it's their court, you know? You don't get to play. You sit down in that room and you have to answer questions and you hope it's not a 4-hour investigation. They can get you out of there in 20 minutes so you can get your bags and go home. I think what was different in this case is you stood up to them in a way where you made their job difficult. You knew, because we always don't know, and every time we see you, we ask you, do I give them a phone? Can I give them, should I show them, like what's my rights? And I think a lot of people don't know what they're entitled to in that buffer zone in the airport.
Right.
So how would you best explain for someone that's traveling what they can and can't do at the airport if they're getting stopped?
You know, what made me rest assured is that I know that I'm an American citizen, and I know I cannot be denied entry into the United States.
They have to let you in.
No matter what, they have to let me into the United States. Now, I also knew that in an extreme circumstance, they're allowed to take your device. I don't think that my position was rising to that extreme circumstance where they had the right to take it, but it was definitely threatened to me. Intense pressure to give up my phone and threatened to me. So whether or not they were going to actually take my device, you know, who knows? You know, maybe if I kept pushing back more and not giving them my contact list at the very end, maybe they would have gave up.
Because who can stop them though?
Yeah, but they could, if they wanted to take it, they could have.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
that,
what
and
I
I
mean.
knew that.
You don't even have to be like that up the scale. They can just take it if they want to.
Correct.
There's no one that's going to stop them. I mean, you can't be like, hey, I don't think I'm like this issue is serious enough for you to take it. They can just like, we didn't want.
Well, yeah, that's our discretion, and we're
Yeah.
going to take it. So that I knew that as well. So that's why I acquiesced to the request of looking at my contact list. That's really the only reason why I did that. However, if you're a non-citizen or a permanent resident, you really it is their game.
Even if you're on green card.
Yeah, because again, an American citizen that can't deny entry, a green card, a permanent resident, they should not deny entry for. Okay, so there are rare occasions where they can deny access on a green card holder as well, permanent resident. You know, for instance, I think there's a rule as a green card holder that you're not supposed to be outside of the United States for a period, longer than 6 months or
Right.
something along those lines. And so if you have been outside of the United States for longer than 6 months, or you have violated the terms or conditions of your green card, whatever the rules are, they can deny entry into the United States. Then they'll parole you into the United States, meaning that they'll let you in, and then we'll deal with that issue in immigration court. So that means you're walking around as a parolee, somebody that's been admitted but with restrictions. So it's an immigration term, and I'm not an immigration lawyer by trade, but I'm familiar with the law. The non-citizen, non-green card holder visa person, a visitor, somebody who's here on a visitor visa, travel visa, student visa, you're at the discretion of the agent.
You're at their mercy.
You're at their mercy. And you would have to comply with those requests and give up your device and go through screening and answer their questions. Now, you don't have to be so forthcoming in your answers, but again, you're at their mercy. They don't have to, allow you to be admitted into the United States. So it is nerve-wracking, and it is, a very fluid. There's no bright line rule of what they can do or cannot do. The border is strange like that, intentionally, because, of the Patriot Act.
What's the Patriot Act?
So after September 11, 2001, the Patriot Act was passed, which gave broad powers to the government for surveillance. And in the thought of national security, or in the pursuit of national security, I should say, our rights were taken away from us at the border. And the Supreme Court has ruled that at the border, the Fourth Amendment is not there for searches and seizures of electronic devices. So that's the carve out, and that's I don't agree with that. I don't know why our Supreme Court allowed that, but again, that's the stress test on the judiciary. That's the stress test on the law. Those are the stress tests on our rights. I have to be the person who can raise awareness to this, so that if I do have an issue that arises out of my phone information, right? Let's say they come back and charge me with a crime. Hey, we found this on your phone. Well, wait a minute. You weren't supposed to go through my phone.
Right.
How did you get that information? Well, we did, and we got it. And so now I'm charged with a crime. Now I can challenge the evidence that they're using against me based on how they found it. You violated my rights. You violated my attorney-client privilege. You violated the ability for me to not be searched or seized or detained. Now I have standing to challenge something. And it goes through the court system. It goes up through the district court level. If a judge will rule that this is inappropriate and they're not allowed to use this evidence, then it goes up to the appellate level and it's reviewed again. And then it could end up in the Supreme Court where the law is changed. The Supreme Court is the rule of law. They're the ones that the buck stops with them. And they're the ones who interpret the laws that the legislature pass. See, Congress is writing laws. The president signs them and asks the Congress to present them, but it's the courts that interprets them to see if they meet constitutional standards. And it's the courts that will tell us what they mean and how to implement them. And the lawyers are the ones who are advocating, with the law. It's really a beautiful thing, man. The law is, to me, I'm passionate about, and it's an art form to know the statutes, to know the rules, to know the case law, to read them and be able to advocate for a position with the tools that we have.
Have you had experience with Supreme Court?
No, I've never been able to get that experience, which would be an amazing experience. I have friends that have argued before the United States Supreme Court, and it's it's a very amazing experience. It's an honor to do that.
So can you explain to me a little bit about, if I'm traveling, what should I be careful of at the border? What kind of advice can you give me?
Sure. So look, as a U.S. citizen, again, they can't deny you entry to the United States, but if you are concerned that in the rare chance that you're stopped and they're going to ask to see your phone, travel with a device that doesn't have all your data. So take a phone that is just for traveling, that doesn't have all the sensitive data that you're concerned about, or privileged information if you're somebody that has a profession that's privileged. Because think about a journalist who might have contacts from politicians, from criminals even, from, there's a lot. A journalist has contacts with thousands of people.
Yeah.
Think about a doctor who is, has access to electronic medical records on his phone or her phone. There are reasons why we have privacy laws.
That's really scary.
So that's important for these privacy laws to be maintained. So take a device that doesn't have all that data. That's the easiest way to do it.
It's I think what scares people the most is government overreach. When you feel like you're suffocated by the government, that like you were saying, that privacy isn't there. You feel like you're almost not allowed to have it anymore.
Well, in that setting, it is that way. It is that way ultimately, because they could take your device. And I wasn't afraid of being incarcerated or arrested or sent to jail or charged with, because that was not a part of my thought process. But some folks might feel that any time you get questioned that you're going to be arrested.
Right.
A lot of people, they're going to arrest me, man. They're going to put me in handcuffs soon here. Like, I better comply, because they're talking to cops. They're talking to federal agents. They're talking to people who can arrest you. They have police powers. But that's not the case. They're not there to do that. They arrest you if there's a reason to arrest you. They need a warrant for that.
And I think in some weird way, what makes it even more stressful is that they came in plain clothes. And you kind of feel like, all right, a regular investigation, everyone's wearing uniform. A step above that is we don't even have to wear a uniform here.
Right.
Do you think that plays into the psyche at all?
Oh, absolutely. That's done intentionally. That is done to intimidate and to show you that there's a difference in status with the agents. If anybody has seen the video of the Turkish woman who was a student, and I think she was in Boston. I don't remember her name, but there was a young lady who wrote an op-ed article in a newspaper, or maybe in a campus newspaper or something along those lines, about the Palestinian issue. And she was on a student visa. And plainclothes agents came to her in the middle of the day, maybe about 5 o'clock at night on the street, and just arrested her, took her, almost like a kidnapping.
I saw that. It looks like a kidnapping because how it's 4 people gang up on you and be like,
right,
we got to go.
So, and they could still do that to me. I might be approached in the grocery store by an agent and ask questions. They'll walk by me. Hey, we want to talk to you. Come here. And the government does that. That's intimidation. That's designed to instill fear, and it's designed to dissuade you from, pushing the powers that be. There's 2 types of agents, federal agents. There are some that are like myself, attorneys who believe in rights and happen to work for the government because they believe that they're going to better the power of government. They're doing good, and they believe in rights, and they believe in civil rights, and they believe in individuals' citizenship rights. There are a lot of agents like that, and those are the agents that I'm always get on good terms with because I see them as equals. There are other agents that have attitudes where, how dare you challenge our authority? How dare you think that you can't submit to what I tell you? And those are the agents that you always confront with, and because but it's not, you don't have to submit to their power, because I know that when we get into a courtroom, it's the United States government versus me, and I'm on the same level. Their table height is the same height as my table, and that's designed that way in the courtroom
to feel like it's equal here.
A level playing field.
Level playing field.
In any courtroom you go to in America, the judge is higher. Always. That's also intentional, because the court is on a higher playing field than the litigant. So that's why I know that, hey man, we can walk into court here. That's where we can decide a controversy. That's important.
If you've gotten this far into the episode, you know that Amir is representing a University of Michigan student that got convicted of a crime during the encampments for Palestine. And as these stories hit the news more and more and more, Amir isn't the first story, he won't be the last. But you understand that when it comes to this issue, we really have to come together. And there are always things that you can do. One easy thing you can do and change is the beverages that you purchase. Palestine Drinks was founded on the idea that they want to send 100% of the proceeds of the product back to Palestine. 100%. In addition to that, it's a product that doesn't compromise on quality. It's a very high quality product. I was invited to multiple iftars this Shahr Ramadan, and the general consensus of most of the people there was I would have never been able to tell the difference. And that makes Palestine Drinks a no-brainer. And now they're starting to get sold in America, so you can get yours as well. I think it's the least we can do. And now, back to the episode. Does it worry you at all that even on that court level, that it won't be fair?
So, yes,
'Cause
absolutely.
people have biases anyways.
Well, here's the thing. The politics of the judiciary come into play as well. In the federal system, judges are appointed. Okay? Federal judges are appointed for lifetime appointments. They're judges until they die.
Oh, really?
Yes. They're not elected. They don't run for election. And they're there until they either retire or they pass away. And so the president of the United States nominates a judge, an attorney to be a judge in the federal system, and they go through a political confirmation from the Senate.
Okay.
Okay? This is why it becomes political, because the Republican Party will pick their judges that believe that, in their thought process, and a senator who's Republican will try to support that nominee. And then when the next president comes around, and if it's a Democrat, they'll do the same thing. So they're packing the courts, and they're doing this intentionally. Like Trump, one of the biggest mistakes President Obama made, probably the biggest mistake President Obama made, was there was an open seat when he was in his lame duck session as the president. There was an open seat on the United States Supreme Court, and they waited to fill that seat until the election was over between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And that seat swayed the court because Donald Trump won, and the Democrats didn't think that would happen because they couldn't read it. The Democrats are way off right now. I don't know what the hell they're thinking these days because they keep losing tremendously. But the Republicans were able to put a justice on. Same thing happens in state court. Now, state court judges are elected, but the majority of state court judges are appointed by the governor. You can run for a judge. I can, as an attorney, put my name on the ballot if I get enough signatures and try to run against an incumbent judge. But that's routinely not done because it's difficult for lawyers to beat an incumbent judge, and it's difficult to go against a sitting judge if you lose. So a lot of lawyers avoid that. The more appropriate way, and the more I don't know if it's appropriate actually, the more common way is you're appointed to that position as a judge, and then you run for re-election. And most judges are ran unopposed. You'll notice in every election cycle there will be a ballot of 16 judges, and select 16 out of 16. People skip over them because they're all in.
Yeah.
It's rare that there's a contested seat for a judge. Now, at the district court level, the lower judge, the community judges, those are often, there's races, there's elections for those. But at the circuit court level and at the Court of Appeals, mostly appointed. And even at the Supreme Court, those get appointed as well. But it's based off of political appointments mostly.
And you trust that the judges will make the right decision? It would be fair?
I believe in our judicial system. I don't think that it's perfect.
Okay.
But I do believe that there is you have a right to a trial, and you have the right to a jury trial. Okay? And a jury trial is the most powerful thing in the American justice system. Because if you're charged with a crime, or if you have a negligence case, for example, right? If you were wronged and through no fault of your own, you were injured by somebody else's negligence, and you lost limb or life if there was a death as a result of this, or you were injured in some serious form, and you can go to a jury and ask for the jury to award you damages based off of what they believe is fair and reasonable. And in a civil case, you might have 6 or 7 jurors. But in a criminal case, if I'm charged with a crime, you get 12 people.
Oof.
And all of them have to agree. There can't be 6 yes, 6 no.
Yeah.
It can't be 7 yes, 7 no. It has to be all or nothing.
A unanimous decision.
Unanimous decision. And that's important. So if you go to a jury trial and all 12 jurors believe that you're guilty of a crime, well, most of the time you're guilty of the crime unless there was some, unless there was some bad faith done by the prosecution or law enforcement in the investigation. And what was presented to the jury was unfair. So that's when people get convictions reversed on appeals, because there was something unfair about the procedure, and the due process that individual received wasn't right. And so that's why I also like our judicial system, because you get the right to appeal, and you get a second set of eyes. And this time the appellate judges are 3, not 1 judge. You get 3 judges who review these, and you get to argue to those 3 judges, and they could set it aside. And then even after that, you might get a prosecutor that comes back and says, hey, I reviewed this file, and I think that there's some exonerating evidence here. And I don't think this person that was convicted of this crime was the person who did it. And they can come back and set aside your conviction. So there's ways to do it. And I know at least 3 people, and I'm representing one of them right now, who were convicted of murder and didn't do it, who spent 8 to 10 years in prison for crimes they did not do. So there are flaws in the justice system, but it took 8 to 10 years to correct it. And that's wrong. But that's why lawyers are important. And that's why lawyers who have effective representation are important.
You come across a lot of controversy.
Oh, yeah.
You're very, especially criminal justice, very controversial, because you have a side that will say that you're representing the good side, but then there's the other side that says, no, you're representing the bad guy. And you kind of have to battle with that. And there's no way that those words don't get to you, I feel like.
There was a case I took maybe a year ago or 2 years ago where there was somebody in our community that was killed. I got a lot of backlash for representing the individual that my client shot this person. He ended up taking a plea and accepted responsibility to shooting this person. This is, and then this case was publicized. So, it was well publicized. But the backlash that I received, the threats that I received, that was intimidation, not from the government. That was intimidation from the community. That was dissuasion from the community, because the community was upset about what happened. And then the lawyer looked like, well, how could you in good conscience defend someone accused of murder?
That's how I would think too.
Right. And I don't look at it that way.
How do you
I say, okay, no problem. This person is accused of murder. I understand that. And the defense attorney is not supposed to win if the prosecution does its job correctly, if law enforcement investigates properly. Everybody is entitled to a defense and the right to a trial and the right to argue their position in court. In this specific case, my client had a substantial defense. Substantial. Even though the result was horrific and it was wrong because somebody died. But the controversy happened in my client's home. And there was a shooting in the middle of the night inside the home of my client. Where's the balancing act? Is an intruder allowed to come into my house? Am I not in reasonable fear of my life if somebody comes in? That case was settled in I think a fair result, and I hope it's a fair result. But I can't always control that outcome. But why do I feel that how could I represent somebody charged with murder? I am a firm believer in the right to trial. I'm a firm believer in the right to a defense. And I'm a firm believer in being, an advocate for the level playing field. Because the government shouldn't be able to win for cheating, not investigating the right way, not getting search warrants. They have more power than anybody else. They have the right to arrest you. They have the right to charge you with crimes and they have the right to take away your liberty. I don't have that opportunity as a practicing lawyer. I can't put you in jail. I can't charge you with a crime. I could sue you for money, but I can't take away your freedom. That's why you need, you have a trial. That's why you have, the ability to have due process. So those are the reasons why I don't look at the individual or charge and say, I shouldn't do this because I don't like the result. No, I don't even look at the result at that point.
So I'm just gonna reiterate what you said just so I understand. So you see this crime that happened, person A shot person B. Your way of thinking is if A actually did the crime, he'll end up in jail with me or without me.
Correct.
But he at least has the chance to defend himself because you never know what could have happened.
No, I say if A shoots B, A should be convicted if it's fair, if the system is fair, if the investigation was fair, if it was done by the rules, and if the prosecution did its job properly. That person should be convicted of a crime, and will be convicted of a crime. But if through that process there's something that's unfair about it, right? The way they investigated it was wrong, illegal, or the witnesses that were brought up and put forth were known to be liars. See, in the case I'm representing somebody for right now who did 8 years in prison for a murder he didn't do.
Yeah, how did he end up
The prosecutor brought a witness to trial who was a buddy, a bunkie rather, somebody who the client was in jail with, pending his case. So when you get charged with a crime, you can get bail and you can't get bail. Generally, when you're charged with murder, you're not making bail. So the prosecutor brought in a witness who was in the county jail with this person. And that witness says, hey, I was talking to this guy at night one night, and he admitted to the killing. He admitted to the shooting. He told me he did it. Went on the stand and testified to that. And lied about it. It was a false testimony. And so that's why this person got exonerated.
for 10 years?
It took him 8 years,
8 years.
for him to prove that this jailhouse informant came in and lied so that he can get a better deal on his case. And the prosecutor offered him a better deal. That's not fair. That's shocking. This guy was charged with murder. Why would you represent him, Amir? He's charged with murder. But did he do it? I don't know yet. They have to prove it. A charge is not proof or to me that you're guilty of a crime. If you did it, they'll prove it, and they should win. But if they do it wrong, then they shouldn't win. And I would rather have a guilty person walk free than an innocent person be in prison. To me, that's very important.
Wow. It's it makes you think a little bit. Why would you not say, for example, I just don't want to take this case at all. I don't want this headache. The community is gonna push back. I'm good, you know?
So there's two types of attorneys. Some that shy away from controversy and some that don't. I don't look at a case, I don't try to select or deselect the type of case that I take based off of the perception of what will happen. That, reputational harm to me that could result in taking on this type of a case, I think will put me in a position, let me just explain this in a little better way. If I start thinking, hey, I shouldn't take this case because the community might not like it or it might hurt my reputation, then I'm going to end up, declining a lot of things. Because in my practice and as an attorney, it's adversarial. It's confrontational. It's one side versus the other. You're always going to have, another side that's against what you're doing. And I might not please the other side, because it's confrontational. That's the very nature of the law, in litigation at least. So I could have done maybe transactions, real estate transactions. There's nothing confrontational about that.
Right.
That's contracts, buying and selling property or real estate or businesses. That's pretty easy. You can. There's nobody's upset with you with that lawyer unless you're on the other side of the negotiating table and you have a smart attorney who snuck in some provisions in the contract that you didn't understand. Those are, that's one type of the area of the law. But in litigation, you have controversy, you have confrontation. So I can't look into how is this going to hurt my reputation unless it's like really, really something that I don't think that I could represent a racist because my personal belief is not there.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Is there an interview process before you take on the case? Like, let's say I came to you, I told you, hey, my friend he's convicted of murder or they're accusing him of murder. Would you go interview him before you really like, okay, I'll take this on?
So I do interview.
Okay.
And I'd like to get the facts, and I like to try to determine if there is a defense for this individual, and if I'm comfortable presenting this defense. So it's not a community factor. It's not a reputational factor. Is there a defense factor? My analysis would be will my heart be in defending this person? Because if let's say there was a racist, let's say there was a member of the Ku Klux Klan that came to me and said, I need you to represent me for being a racist. I'm not going to want to be involved in that, because my heart's not in that. I don't believe in what that person did. Now, I could believe in their right to express, some beliefs that are against my personal beliefs. You have that right. Terry Jones came to Dearborn one time when I was in law school. And Terry Jones is the pastor from Florida who was burning Qur'ans and wanted to come to the mosque on Ford Road and display a Qur'an burning. And everybody went up in arms. The whole community lost their minds, and which, as rightfully so, it's blasphemy. But does Terry Jones have the right to do that in America?
Does he?
Yes. That's freedom of expression. You can do that. That's speech. And I believe that you should be able to exercise speech. Even though I disagree with the speech, it's blasphemy. But he had that right. He could do that. It's wrong. I wouldn't represent Terry Jones. I'm not going to go stand up and be his advocate and say, hey, he gets to burn the Quran in open court. Screw Terry Jones. I'm not going to represent him. But he has that right.
Are they usually truthful when you interview them? Like if you tell them, hey, did you actually kill the guy, shoot the guy and kill him? Are there cases where you're like, yeah?
So a lot of times the defense attorney won't ask that ultimate issue because I really don't want to be lied to. I don't want to be lied to.
Okay.
I'll look at the facts from what the police have. Because it's not about what my client says ultimately, it's what the prosecution can prove. You're innocent until proven guilty, and the burden is on the prosecutor. It's not on the defendant. The defendant doesn't have to do anything. The defendant does not have to say anything. When you've seen the Miranda rights, you have the right to remain silent, and anything that you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. That means that I don't have to say anything, because I have the right to remain silent. And even through the trial, I can maintain that silence as a defendant. So I don't have to get up and explain myself as to what happened. The person who's accusing me of the crime has to prove it. And that's the prosecutor through their investigation. And the cops who have done this investigation should have done that investigation lawfully. And so as the defense attorney, we're looking at what the investigation was, how it was done, the evidence that they've completed, and we're also looking at our own investigation as defense attorneys. Oftentimes, and what set me apart from other lawyers is I put in experts in my cases. I'll hire a private investigator to go back and review everything that the law enforcement team has done. I'll bring on a cell phone tower analyst who can tell me where my client's phone was if he's accused of being somewhere he shouldn't have been, so that I can know if that's true. I'll bring on a psychologist if I think that there's an insanity defense or somebody who might have lost their mind, and present that type of a defense if that's warranted. There's a ballistics expert on the caliber of a bullet, and to determine where this bullet could have come from and what kind of gun was it, and was my client in possession of that type of a weapon. Those are things that are tools that a defense attorney can do on their own. And that's why, a lot of times people say you should hire an attorney if you can afford it, because you can bring on those experts and it makes a difference. Some people don't have that luxury of being able to financially afford that type of a defense. And Michigan, as of late, has been trying to give people appointed attorneys who have that experience. I've been blessed, and we've been busy always in my career, so I don't do court-appointed cases. So another thing is, the clients have to be able to afford these types of defenses. And it gets expensive, unfortunately. It does.
How expensive? What's expensive?
Tens of thousands of dollars.
Okay.
And it can lead up to sometimes six figures, in bigger cases. And that's not easy for most people.
Do you sleep well at night?
Of course.
Okay. So I feel like it's such a burden on the heart and on the mind, everything that, like this tug between what did you do, what did he do, and probably a million different scenarios go through your head. You've seen like hundreds of people, defended hundreds of people. It's good if you can go home and be like, I can sleep comfortably knowing that justice was served properly.
So I lose sleep over the people that I believe are innocent, and I have to help them. I lose sleep over that. I get anxious about those people. And there are many times, people that are wrongfully accused of crimes, but I also wear a different hat. I take it off when I'm home with my family.
Is it easy though to take it off?
I've made it easy. I've mentally became able to do it. How I am with my friend group is not how I am professionally. And I think a lot of us are like that. In my closest friend group, we joke around a lot. We go out, we hang out, we socialize. And that is nice to have that social environment. And especially, I wish that the American experience was similar to that of the Lebanese experience, because they are very social in Lebanon and very family-oriented in Lebanon. However, here in the United States, it's not like that, and we don't get the opportunity to have as much family time and social time as we would back home in Lebanon. So that's, one of the main reasons why I think in Lebanon they're not depressed, despite all the war and despite all the economic trouble they've had and all the horrible things that they've gone through and experienced in their human experience. They have family, they have social life, they have friends. And that's important. So I try to keep that for myself to have that balance, that work-life balance. But, I can easily turn the hat back on and to put the lawyer hat on.
We've known each other for a while, and every time I seen you, you're the same person every single time. There's not one time that I saw you that I saw that you were stressed, upset, angry, and that kind of makes me curious to how does someone able to shut that off? And like regular jobs,
yeah.
And sometimes you find that hard to like if you have an office job, sometimes it's hard to turn that off. Let alone if you work on high profile cases and you're a defense attorney.
So I've been always known and I've been told that I'm a very patient person. And I'm a very trying to be calm person. And I think that I've learned to be patient and calm in a lot of scenarios because I've seen struggles of others and various degrees of struggles of others, and I know everything's going to be okay. You know, at the end of it all, this too shall pass. And I know that. I know that. And I get stressed out myself about things that I'm dealing with in my life, but it gets better. Always it gets better. Because the controversy of 10 years ago doesn't feel as big of a deal today. You know, the fight that you would have had with your brother or sister when you were a kid, you probably don't even remember today. And that could have been the biggest problem in the world when it happened. But time heals. And that's why I say to myself when I started this interview with you, right? When I sat down, I said, look, you can't stress out about the things that are outside of your control. You can't do it. You just got to be mindful of what you can control and what you can do. And you got to be able to let go. You just have to. Because otherwise you'll have too much overthinking and the mental exercise will be overwhelming.
Letting go is difficult.
Absolutely is. Absolutely, it's very difficult. But that's an exercise in mental health. It has to be something that you can compartmentalize and do.
Like letting go in the sense of doing everything that you can, but then
do what you can control, but don't worry about the result. Because you can't control the result. I could present a case in court. I can't guarantee I'm going to win. That's not my decision. It's the judge or the jury.
Are you comfortable with not winning?
I don't like to lose, but I accept it if there's a loss. You know, I'm not a person that says I hate losing. I've met people and I've had clients who have been, you know, very successful in their business careers, almost fanatical in their business careers, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But I got turned off by the obsession of winning. And sometimes people want to win it by all means, any means, and sometimes there could be even dishonest means, and I'm not a fan of that either. So. Am I motivated? Yes. You know, I'm a motivated individual. Do I have a personality that wants to be a go-getter and be proactive in life? Yes. But I'm not somebody that wants to win at all costs, at all means, and play dirty. No way. That's not my personality. You know, so if I have a case and I'm not winning, the case is just, it is what it is. We're on the wrong side of the coin. That's okay. No big deal.
So your number one thing is justice. Winning goes second, which is a weird concept for a lot of people because, like you just said, people want to win first. But in your case, it would be justice number one, winning number two.
Yeah, you have to win fairly if you win, you know, and that's important. It has to be fair. And, you know, and that goes for anything in life, not just in the law. You know, you want fairness in all struggles of life, in all environments.
The bit that scares me a little bit is, see how you said that gentleman was in prison for 8 years? Let me present this to you and let me know what you think. You walk in, you're a killer in the courtroom, you know? You're very confident, you're very eloquent in the way you speak. You know you're going to communicate very well. And on the other side, you have an attorney that isn't as experienced. Maybe they were cheaper, so the other side had to go with them because they couldn't afford a better attorney. But they were the right side of the coin.
Got it.
And just by your expertise, you were able to get the win. Like those are the scenarios that I struggle with.
So that to me, in that scenario you described, that would be cheating, right? But I have a job to do, and I have a client to represent. But if I know I'm taking advantage of the inexperience of my opposition, whose fault is it? Mine or the inexperienced one? You know, I don't know. It could be mine. I could be taking advantage of their inexperience and their inability to perform at my level or my expertise. But I'm not the decision maker. The court is. So I'm presenting my case, but I'm not the one who decides who's right or wrong. I'm just doing my job. They decide.
Even if you know who's right and who's wrong?
I'm not the decision maker. I'm not the judge. I don't look at it and what do I believe? Because it's not my issue. I'm an advocate. And so the court has to decide who's right or wrong. And that's a foreign concept for most people.
It is.
But that's the way the law is. And in the eyes of the law, that's the more appropriate thing to do. In the eyes of the law, you should be your advocate. You should be your client's advocate. And you should present your client's position to the best of your ability. And don't minimize your abilities because your opposition is inexperienced or negligent. That's you can't do that in the eyes of the law. You're supposed to advocate on your client's position to the best of your ability.
Very difficult job, to be honest. Definitely
It
not
is.
for everybody.
Oh, it's not for everybody. It's not for the faint of heart at all.
Yeah.
At all. And it's stressful. It's stressful. And, you know, I could have gone into my family business and probably been successful in that.
What's your family business?
I grew up, my parents owned a collision shop and car washes and, you know, we had a gas station at one point. You know, so my dad was an entrepreneur, a small business entrepreneur. And when I wanted to go to law school, my dad told me, for what? We have a business. And my response to him was, if I don't make it, I'll come back.
Yeah.
Luckily for me, the law school that I went to, which was Wayne State, was right next to our collision shop. We have a collision shop on the campus of Wayne State.
Okay.
So I was able to go to work and go to school. And when I'm in law school on break, I'm pulling up to the collision shop and I'm handling estimates and, you know, I would even do some minor painting and priming and masking of cars and ordering parts and making sure the customers are happy with the result and, you know, managing a body shop. And, you know, when I was in undergrad, I was buying and selling cars and fixing them up in our shop and selling them on eBay and doing that. And even when I was really young, when I was maybe 10 or 11 years old, my brother, who's 6 or 7 years older than I am, was, you know, parking cars at Tiger Stadium. You know, and I would go with him and help him. And so that was at the old Tiger Stadium on Michigan and Trumbull before they tore it down, not Comerica Park.
Yeah.
So I was a kid running around downtown working. So I've got, you know, that experience of being taught that we have to go to work. And I have been blessed to have a coaching tree from my father and my mother about the ethics of hard work and the ability to work hard. My dad was not an educated man, but he was a successful man. And the reason why he was successful is because he got up every morning at 4:30 and he went to work. I've never seen my dad a day in his life as a child not wake up at 4:30 in the morning and get up and go to work. Every single day, 7 days a week, he got up and went to work.
That's setting a very high standard.
Yeah, and I still feel to this day, you know, I don't even know what the word is. Well, I feel like I'm not measuring up to his work ethic because I get up at 6:30. I feel less than him.
Yeah. Even till now.
Even till now.
Okay.
If I sleep until 9, holy smokes, I get out of bed and I start thinking, well, man, my dad would kill me if he heard about that. So that's something that was instilled in me. In order to be successful, you got to get up and go to work. And like I said, he wasn't an educated man, but he just, you know, in this country, it's a good system. If you work hard, you will make it. somehow, some way. And again, a lot of it, in my belief, is it's faith as well. Allah will give you, the blessings of rizq, goodwill, for those who work hard and do good work with the right intentions. My faith, when talking about the type of work that I do, I have to feel at ease that I'm doing what's right in my faith as well. And that's a hard concept. There was a imam, maybe last Ramadan or 2 Ramadans ago, 2 years ago, and he said he had a khutbah, he had a speech. I think it was one of the Qazwini, Sayyid Qazwini, one of his sons, or I forget who it was, about the law and Islam. The takeaway from that speech was it's almost haram to practice law. It's very hard. It's very hard to find that balancing act. But I have to feel that I'm doing what's right in my heart of hearts, and I have to be able to communicate with my God, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, about what we do. And I feel that I'm doing what's right in my heart of hearts.
Do you have conversations with him?
In my dua, in my prayers, yes. And I always ask God to forgive me. Allah samihni. Please forgive me if I'm doing something wrong, and guide me to the right path. Because I want to be doing the right thing always. Always.
What are some cases that have, they tug on your heartstrings?
I don't know that anything comes to mind right away. Immediately comes to mind as to something that's tugging away at my heartstrings, and I don't feel that I've done anything in my heart of hearts where I shouldn't have. I don't have that experience.
No, like you feel passionately about. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. All right. Tugging at my heart of hearts in a passionate way.
Yeah, a case that when it's presented to you, like a type of case that was when presented to you, you feel very passionately about. You feel like, I really want to get justice for this person.
The protester case I'm dealing with now is a case I feel very passionate about. Early on in my career, maybe within the first year or two of my practice, a young lady came into my office who was arrested for driving without a license. Okay? No big deal. She must have been 20 years old or 22 years old, early 20s. And she was arrested for driving without a license. Her license was suspended for not paying a speeding ticket. And, whether she forgot or couldn't afford to pay it, I don't remember. But she went to jail for that night for being without a license. The distinction with this young lady was she was a muhajjabah. She wore a headscarf. And the police asked her to remove her headscarf when they were arresting her. And she spent the night in jail, or hours in jail, until she was able to bail herself out. For driving while license suspended. So this is a minimal traffic misdemeanor. Very low level crime. Very, very low level crime. But her civil rights were stripped at the jailhouse door. She had to endure the embarrassment of taking off her scarf in front of cops, take a mugshot with her scarf off, and, luckily she didn't have to go before a judge without her scarf. I was upset about that scenario, and I sued the police because of that. And we won. I changed the policy on that. I was very passionate about that. And that got widespread attention nationally. I think I was the first, or one of the first in Michigan, to challenge this policy of removing hijab when a woman is arrested.
Why was that so important to you?
I felt that was wrong, that my client's faith and the ability for law enforcement or government to do their job shouldn't be in conflict with each other. And I don't think that the government should be able to trample my other rights, which is my right to, religion, because you have freedom of religion in America as well. If I'm getting arrested. you can't strip my religious rights at the jailhouse door. You know, I'm still a Muslim. And as a woman who's wearing a scarf, to be exposed without her hijab in front of men that are not her relatives is a very, very difficult thing to do. And it's demoralizing. It's embarrassing, and it's wrong. So when that occurred, I said, I'm going to try to change this policy. And I'm still, to this day, advocating for a policy change. And luckily, we have a state representative in Alabas Farhat who's been, and a police chief in Dearborn, Chief Shaheen, who is advocating for a legislative change, not just a policy change on the local police department level, but at a state legislative level, that it should be illegal for your religious liberties to be stripped at the jailhouse door, to take off your headscarf if you're arrested. That's still not on the books in Michigan or anywhere in the United States that I believe, for that matter. But there are local policies, there are law enforcement policies, and my policy was used, locally here, statewide, and national. The city of Ann Arbor adopted my policy. The city of New York adopted my policy. I got calls from lawyers in Texas who used my policy as an example when dealing with their law enforcement cases over there. So that went national, and I was passionate about that. Those are the types of things as to why I became an attorney and why I do what I do.
And you can relate to that woman because you probably have family members that wear the headscarf, and it's so relatable. And the frustration, even as you were saying the story, like my stomach started hurting right now.
Right.
It's like, what?
Yeah.
Like she had to do that in front of everybody.
Right.
Yeah. So I get that. It's
So that was one of the first kind of controversial and high-profile cases that I was involved in. And that came from me trying to do the right thing. And so it just falls in my lap. I'm not out here. I don't market too much, with billboard media. I do social media, some social media marketing and local, but I don't have TV commercials. It's all word of mouth in my business. And, for the longest time, it was frowned upon for lawyers to advertise. I don't think that the law changed for a lawyer to be able to advertise until the 70s. It was illegal for attorneys to market themselves and pay for advertising.
wow.
Until the 1970s.
I didn't know that.
It just became a thing. And now it's becoming so commercialized where it will soon be a situation where private equity will buy law firms. Currently, you must be an attorney in order to own or practice law, but to own a law firm for that matter. But they are changing that. It will be at some point in the future the privatization of the practice of law, and you will get hedge funds, you will get venture capitalists, and you will get private equity money to buy law firms, run law firms, and manage law firms, and it's going to be really commercialized.
Does that worry you?
Yes, because it worries me for the accessibility to the law. Whether or not it's going to be will the common person be able to be accessible to attorneys? And that is more intimidating than, what the government did to me at the border. Because if I can't make a living as an attorney, because, the private equity law firms are so good at marketing and getting business and garnering business that I can't get into the market at all. They dominate the market. They're McDonald's and I'm just, Sam sandwiches. Then it's going to be difficult for me to compete. And it's going to be difficult for some people who are in marginalized communities, in immigrant communities, to be able to have access to the law. And that's worrisome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And plus, those hedge funds have unlimited money, unlimited resources.
Right.
So even if you're not bought by a hedge fund, you're probably not. It's going to be very difficult to compete with the resources as well.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And then artificial intelligence is going to change the law a lot, and it already has. In terms of research in the law, in terms of writing in the law, and in terms of how cases are presented, artificial intelligence is already making its way through the legal world. But that could be for the better.
Yeah. How do you feel about what happened to you in terms of the future? What kind of effect do you think what happened to you at the border has moving forward?
Only time will tell. I don't know. I don't know what impact it's going to be. God knows. I don't know.
How serious do you think this situation is as a country?
I think that as a nation, our civil rights are on attack. And I think that the government needs to respect what the Constitution says, the current administration. Because administration changes and government changes with who the administrators are. So it's appropriate to push back, and it's important to push back and stand up for our rights. And I hope to be able to continue to do that and have the ability to do that and be blessed enough to be an advocate for folks. It's a blessing for me to have this ability because I get to help people. And that's something that I think is important.
I see. Well, Amir, thank you. This was great. I think it was very knowledgeable. I think people understand now what they should do, what to expect, and hopefully, this only results in less, inshallah, in some weird way, less pressure on our movement, because I feel like that's a big stressor always.
Always, yeah, for sure. Inshallah.
Habibi.
We have to say inshallah for everything.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. All right.